I'm honestly kind of happy that it was mostly your frontal lobe that was damaged.
What's that?
So it sounds like you really stood out, or you were trying really hard to do so. It seems difficult to be so different when all you really wanted was to be loved, considering what we talked about last week.
Welcome to another episode of Personified Mind,
where concepts are personified and molded into impressive main characters.
This is RJB.
And this is Fear.
Today I'm going to have Fear interview my core value of individuality.
Is the idea for me to tell you how you're a precious little snowflake?
Sure, and then you can help me explain why I'm a 40-year-old with a teddy bear.
Good. I just wanted to make sure we're on the same page.
Anyway, I'm more interested in you helping me explain why individuality is more important than assimilation.
This might be a hot take, but you do realize that if everyone chooses to be an individual, they are just assimilating.
I think I understand now what it's like to be one of my partners. Let's just get started, Fear.
So, RJ, tell me how your affinity for individuality started to crown.
That's graphic. Ironically, I think I would have never appreciated individuality if it weren't for my deadbeat father.
I think I understand what you're trying to say, but could you explain how your deadbeat father actually helped you?
Like I said last week, I wanted to be the opposite of my father, and because my body said differently, I had to find interesting ways to be a boy without being toxic and overly masculine. I was kind of conforming to whatever my mother wanted, but I wanted to be different from my father, and the key there was, different.
Are you saying that your affinity for individuality started by despising your father?
I'm just trying to trace back as far as I can to find the first time I learned to appreciate differences. To be an individual, the prescription kind of requires the mind to be different. Individuality requires a lot of dissenting behavior, and what better way to be an individual than be a rebel and flip the script?
That's some interesting insight. How do you think your appreciation for individuality was able to proliferate when you were younger?
Well, despite the first 10 years of my life where I thought I was supposed to be normal, my pre- and post-adolescent mind was more interested in being able to slip between cliques, rather than just fit into one. Maybe I was hedging my bets, but there was a part of me that was kind of a contrarian. There was also a part of me that truly didn't want to be normal, believing that my father's toxic behavior was supposed to be normal.
That's a very fair assumption to make. Did any of your friends have a similar anti-father figure?
There were a few, but I was mostly surrounded by traditional households. I remember one of my friend's fathers challenging me to a wrestling match when I was about 8 years old. The prick body slammed me, leaving me unable to breathe. I panicked and I never really forgave him for being what I thought was normal. However, I did make one friend in middle school who was on my wrestling team, and he had a deadbeat father as well. My new friend was definitely an individual. He loved death metal and his mom was awesome. We talked a lot of shit about our dads whenever we hung out. But one part that bothered me was that my father was the first person to introduce me to metal, so that part of our friendship kind of left a bitter taste in my mouth. My new friend was my best friend, though, and after a while I feel like I wanted to appreciate metal more.
Neuroplasticity is an impressive coping mechanism inside the mind. Minds will often try as hard as they can to replace bad feelings with good ones, and it seems like your mind was creating a new connection to metal. Do you think your mind wanted to abandon all negative feelings related to your father to create a new connection to your friend?
That would make a lot of sense because that's almost exactly what happened. Looking back at it now, when my father stopped listening to metal and started listening to country after he went to rehab, I think the irony was pretty funny. I've always been completely content with hating country music. It is kind of disturbing, though, that so many minds abandon individuality and give up on their free will to a higher power. I think both my father and mother wanted to abandon conformity when they were younger, before it was conceived. Maybe there's something I inherited that left me starving for the rebellion they always wanted.
If you follow epigenetics at all, it's very possible that a lot of your feelings were passed down genetically. How did your individuality set you apart in high school?
I think I hit my peak individuality obsession when I was in high school. I was popular, but only because everyone knew me. I didn't fit in anywhere. I was a punk, metalhead, goth, jock, nerd, teacher's pet, and I needed to be different all the time. On top of that, I was very shy, up until a car accident with a traumatic brain injury that turned me into a social butterfly.
I'm honestly kind of happy that it was mostly your frontal lobe that was damaged.
What's that?
So it sounds like you really stood out, or you were trying really hard to do so. It seems difficult to be so different when all you really wanted was to be loved, considering what we talked about last week.
It was strange, and some would call it counterintuitive. Even my mom told me that it was going to be hard to make friends with how different and difficult I wanted to be. My mother's best interest really wanted me to be normal, maybe so my life didn't turn out like hers did. It's difficult to be different when the ones we look up to just want us to be normal.
I'm sure it was very difficult, considering that you said your mother was a notable inspiration to be a feminist. It almost sounds like that even though you looked up to your mother, you were resistant to doing what she wanted when she asked you to be normal. Do you think the anger you held toward your father might have been a stronger inspiration to be a feminist, and different?
That's a really good point, because his influence kind of encouraged a toxic level of self-loathing. My father was very religious, and I told my mom that I didn't want to go to church when I was 10. My father was layered with toxic masculinity, and I've always wanted to be kind of feminine. My father was a farmer, and all I really wanted to be was an artist. Thanks for the insight, Fear.
I apologize, RJ. What I said seemed kind of triggering. Are you going to be okay?
No worries at all, Fear. I think it was more revelatory than triggering. Ironically, I might have to say thank you to my father for helping me aspire to be so strange. I might have given up on standing out if I had any respect for my father.
I've always appreciated that you try to put a positive spin on trauma, reimagining the reasoning for all your past experiences. I'm sure it was difficult to always be positive, though. Did you ever feel betrayed by your emotions or your values?
Way too often, but I don't think it was my emotions that were betraying me. My conscious mind needed to make sense of everything, and my conscious mind rarely ever wanted to have a clear dialogue with my subconscious. My conscious mind always felt like it needed to find the easiest path, while my subconscious was enthralled with chaos and creativity. After my traumatic brain injury, I've tried to describe my process of reasoning as using right brain logic, but maybe it was subconscious logic.
That is pretty funny because the left side of the brain is historically more logical. That must have been difficult, attempting to make logical sense of creativity and emotions.
It was, and still is, but right now I'm trying to lean into it. I believe I have a stronger relationship with my emotions and feelings because my conscious mind is finally learning your language. To me, there's so much logical sense to being a strange individual.
I like that a lot. How do you think it's logical to stand out and be different when fitting in it provides seemingly invincible strength in numbers?
It's not like I'm trying to say that minds need to be alone just to stand out. Minds can be different and still cohabitate with other like-minded minds. I just think it's counterproductive to prescribe to a single rationale and follow it like the gospel.
Are you saying that being an individual is an anti-religious experience?
Kind of, yeah. There's so many different religions that have very similar moral principles. Most religions have different sects that still have the same foundation of faith, but different paths towards salvation. The mission for an individual within a group of like-minded minds is to tear down the walls of their echo chamber. The echo chamber that some minds cram themselves into kind of isolates them from the rest of the world. Their message will be heard inside the echo chamber, but nobody else will hear it, and the minds inside the echo chamber will find themselves cognitively dissonant to the rest of the world. The individuals who are tearing down the walls are the ones who will amplify their message enough to ripple across the world.
Can't agree with you more. How are you promoting individuality to make it more attractive?
Whenever I see someone doing something outside the padded comfort zone of quote-unquote normal, I make sure to acknowledge their bravery. I compliment minds with very unique hairstyles, telling them to, stay weird. I make sure that every mind knows that happiness doesn't need to be normalized and vulnerability is strength. I call people out who think it's okay to normalize hate, violence, and prejudice. I take every chance I get to make sure that normal isn't comfortable.
I can see those interactions becoming confrontational. Is your sentiment often well received, or do you get some pushback?
Unfortunately, I do get more pushback than compassionate receptions. Normal is how conscious minds justify moving forward because it's safe and reliable. The paradigm arises when a mind compares the idea of moving forward with progress. I think you said it best when you told me that repeating the same story over and over again is just as effective as abusing drugs.
Absolutely. So do you think that minds who choose quote-unquote normal to move forward aren't actually making progress?
Yes, I don't think they're making any progress. Imagine if there was only one route to take to get to any destination. Now imagine if that route is dealing with stop-go, bumper-to-bumper traffic. Maybe there's construction or several car accidents on this route. Maybe emergency vehicles can't remedy the issue because the route is so backed up that they have no way to approach the issue. Basically, if one thing goes wrong on the quote-unquote normal route, every mind who's on it is affected. That's why I think being different is more effective and logical. But it's difficult to imagine being different because many minds don't often daydream about something they're unfamiliar with.
Got it. So normal equals rush hour traffic and different equals back roads. So many minds hate rush hour traffic, but they'll still do it anyway. Why do you think that is?
Well, minds might actually think that the traffic will clear up in a few minutes, and that taking the back road might take longer. Minds might also be afraid that they'll get lost on the back roads and alternate routes.
That's true. My name is invoked a lot in rush hour traffic.
Right? And if a mind does get lost on the back roads, or they realize the traffic was going to clear up eventually, they have a tendency to abandon different because it's unreliable, like my father. Jesus. I don't think I would have realized how big of an influence my father was on my values until I did these interviews.
I feel you there. So how might you want to move forward to help different minds feel safer taking back roads?
That's one route I'm working on right now. I think the research we'll be doing could help portray a different way to approach values and feelings. Basically, I'm going to turn every ounce of my research into a story, attempting to truly turn my values into main characters.
You mean my personified mind?
Exactly. And when we do our research, we are going to question everything that might seem too grounded. We'll fact-check emotional reactions and interact with our feelings when we do our research. I want to engage with interactions on a different level.
That sounds fun. How exactly are you going to research individualism?
Obviously, I'll be focusing a lot on musicians, writers, and artists, but I also want to be able to focus on individuals who take a novel approach to tired tropes and concepts. I want to give my interpretation on what I think these individuals are trying to say without saying it. It's not that I'm going to assume what they're trying to say. I just want to give my interpretation of their content, like examining an art piece at a gallery or finding Easter eggs in a cinema. I'll attempt to pay attention to what's not in focus. I also think it will be fun to react to reactions, because reactions are usually so raw and emotional.
That sounds like you'll be editorializing a lot more than trying to rewrite history. Do you ever plan to record yourself, or are you going to just stick to the pictures of me and you dancing on the brain?
I think I will explore recording myself more in the near future. I just need to practice recording my voice more, and I need to regain the confidence I lost when I stopped drinking.
That's the tragedy of introspection and self-care, isn't it?
Yeah, but like we talked about during your interview, there's nothing wrong with experience enhancers. The caveat is that it can be very easy to fall into the trap of good feelings when a mind becomes unconsciously addicted to dopamine.
That's so true. So RJ, what do you think will be the guiding bias to your research on individualism?
I believe the adverse relationship I have with my father will push me in a certain direction. I won't generally appreciate overly masculine content, so I might have to pay more attention to my bias in that regard. My feminist bias will surely affect the way I develop my understanding of the content I read. I'm sure to appreciate female creators more generously than male creators. I also think that my hypervigilance will assist me in paying attention to anything that doesn't fit where it's supposed to. I'm hyperanalytical, possibly OCD, when it comes to anything that doesn't make logical sense. Standing out kind of describes the chaos in my mind, and I'm in a weird relationship with chaos at the moment.
That's some great reflection, and I will definitely need to ask more about your relationship to chaos next time. I think the last value we'll be talking about next week will be dissent. Is that right?
Absolutely. And after doing these last few interviews, I think I have even more insight into what my bias will look like when it comes to dissent.
I'm excited to do this again next week. This was a great interview, RJ, but always remember,
be smarter than your brain,
and react responsibly.